What we're looking at is a major flash flood 3 days after it happened. A huge amount of rain dropped in Mount Charleston, and all of this water is getting pushed down Grand Teton, which is now an urban river. 2 miles upstream, there's a huge detention basin that captured what equates to a football field as tall as the stratosphere, full of water. Huge amounts of water are still being released from that detention basin, carrying with them trees, boulders, even stalling cars. The fact that whole sections of asphalt have been ripped up by the force of this floodwater tells us how strong these waters are and how dangerous they can be. In this special edition of the Flood Channel, we'll take a look at the factors that contributed to this flood and show you where you can go to learn about flood safety so you're prepared the next time a storm like this occurs. The August 25th storm that hit the valley dropped more than a year's worth of rain in just 3 hours. This after the Carpenter 1 fire wiped out most of the mountain's ability to handle runoff. This storm was the worst of several rainfall events this monsoon season and the most rain we've seen since the district's creation in 1985. But despite all of this rain, the flood control system worked. Homes and businesses were saved and no lives were lost. Unlike past events in the Northwest, flooding was mostly contained to street flooding. There's a saying in the district's office that Mother Nature always seems to rain where we're not yet ready for her. And nowhere is that more apparent than what we saw on Grand Teton Drive. The Flood Control District's master plan is a massive document that outlines all of the flood control infrastructure that spider webs across Clark County. And though we're 75% complete with that master plan, we still have a long way to go. What that means is there are parts of Clark County that are not yet equipped to handle floods of this magnitude.
Well, detention basins in general, we use those to capture large storm flows that generally are coming out of mountainous areas. We capture those flows into a basin and we release those flows downstream at a more controlled flow rate, a less damaging flow rate. And that's what we did with the Kyle Canyon Detention Basin. There's about a 57 square mile area that drains to that detention basin. The basin functioned beautifully. It captured the flows that were coming out of the mountains. It detained those flows. It did release them in a more controlled manner, a less damaging manner downstream. The water level rose in the detention basin to about 27 feet over about a 4-hour period. We estimated that about 1,300 acre feet of water drained into that detention basin, which is about 40% of the volume, so less than half of the detention basin volume was used during this storm event. It could have handled a bigger storm if indeed that did occur. But still, 1,300 acre feet is a lot of water. It's about a football field size, 1 foot deep is an acre foot, and we had 1,300 of those. So if you can imagine 1,300 football fields 1 foot deep, that's how much water is stored in that basin. It's critical for us to be able to drain the basin though. We have to be able to get the water out of the facility in a timely manner because there's always a chance that we'll have another storm event occur right after that first storm event, and that can cause us some problems. So generally, we want the basins drained within 7 days after the storm event. The Kyle Canyon Detention Basin was built in the mid-90s, and when this basin was built, there was really no development downstream at that time. When we built it, we designed it to drain into one of the existing washes that was there. There was no development, there were no roadways to be impacted at that point in time, but as often happens, development caught up to us and roads were built without the benefit of a storm drain system in them, and so that water, instead of running in a wash, actually ran down roadways. During the August 25th storm at the Kyle Canyon Detention Basin, quite a bit of water was captured by the detention basin, about 25 times the amount of water that was released from the detention basin. So we did have water flowing down the road, and it did flow for a prolonged period of time, and that was the basin actually functioning just the way it's supposed to. We have to capture that flow, and we have to release it somehow. So we have to provide some sort of outfall for that facility, and that outfall, in this case, drained down to Wallapai, and it actually eventually ran over some roadways during that process.
This was a bit of a unique setup because we had remnants of Tropical Storm Evo moving up, and the leading edge of the moisture that was associated with that storm was just moving into the Las Vegas area that afternoon. In this case, the storm lasted, instead of lasting an hour or maybe 2 hours, it lasted in its strongest state for about 4 or 5 hours. The storm formed over Kyle Canyon, and then as the cold air began to increase underneath the storm, it actually pushed the storm over the valley. And that just put more rain on top of the runoff that was flowing downhill. So you have rain on top of runoff, which just adds more to the flood wave.
If the detention basin wasn't in place, it would have been a disaster for the northwest area. Hundreds, if not thousands, of homes would have been flooded. We had roadways that were impacted, but really all the roads in the northwest area would have been impacted by this flow had that detention basin not been in existence. The duration of this storm was longer, and it was more intense than what we saw in 2003. So the amount of runoff we got from that storm was quite a bit greater than what was seen going down Gowan, for example, in 2003, probably 2.5 times.
Even though the Las Vegas Valley as a whole didn't receive that much rain, we still had significant, extreme flooding in portions of the valley due to rainfall that fell away from the valley. A lot of times we get our flash flooding on Mount Charleston with 1 inch to 2 inches, and we'll get flash flooding up there. In the Las Vegas Valley, for instance, it only takes 1/3 to 1/2 an inch to produce minor flooding. Once you get up to 1 inch, you can have some pretty devastating flooding in areas. So when you start talking about 4 to 6 inches, it's just more along the lines of catastrophic flooding. Most of the rainfall with this event did not fall on the Carpenter 1 fire. It fell just to the northeast of the Carpenter 1 burn area. However, it doesn't take very much rain for there to be flooding associated with the Carpenter fire. So when you have a major wildfire like the Carpenter 1 burn area was, it gets rid of all the vegetation, and basically there's nothing that inhibits the water from flowing downhill. And so the flash flooding happens much more quickly, and it can bring a lot more debris downhill with it. The Las Vegas Valley is a bowl, and it all flows from the higher terrain to the west, and it all drains out through Henderson and into Lake Las Vegas and eventually into Lake Mead. So even if you have stuff in Mount Charleston, eventually it'll get to Henderson and into Lake Las Vegas.
In addition to all the flow that was captured, quite a bit of sediment and debris was captured as well. Part of the drainage area that drains into this basin is in the burn area from the Carpenter 1 fire, so there was soot and ash in the flow, along with branches and trees and everything else you can imagine in storm flows. And all that debris was captured by the detention basin and kept there instead of going downstream. In a perfect world, we would like to build the detention basin and build the outfall for the detention basin all the way down to some facility that can handle it downstream, but we're constrained by budgets. And so what we wind up doing is building things pieces at a time. The first step we built here was the detention basin, and it provides a lot of benefit. Despite the fact that there's flows going down portions of roadways coming out of this basin, it still provides a lot of benefit by capturing that huge storm event coming out of the mountains. The outfall in this particular case at Kyle Canyon is about 9 miles. We have to build a facility before we can get it to the Las Vegas Wash Middle branch. And about 7.5 miles or so of that facility have been constructed already. We have about 2.5 miles remaining to construct. 2 miles of that actually has been designed. Construction funding has been secured for that facility, and in fact the City of Las Vegas is currently in the bidding process to put that project out to construction. So we expect it to start construction probably by the end of 2013. It'll be constructed right in the Grand Canyon road right-of-way, and it starts from Rainbow and goes to Durango. The intent of that project is to collect the flows as they cross under Durango. We'll take them underground all the way along Grand Teton until it gets to a channel that we previously built near the Rainbow intersection. If that 2-mile section of box culvert had been in place when this storm hit on August 25th, the outfall that we were seeing from the detention basin that was actually surface draining there at Grand Teton near Durango would have been underground. And so the flows down those roadways would have been pretty minimal. There would have been minimal damage, and getting through the roadways would have been a lot easier for the traveling public. Really effectively, this facility will dry that area all up.
The district and the city of Las Vegas knew the plans to better protect this area had to be pushed forward. Projects that were years and years out are now getting immediate attention. And by 2015, the projects to control flooding on Grand Teton will be finished.
But today I'm happy to announce that thanks to our partnership with the Clark County Regional Flood Control District, one of the major projects that will help eliminate the flooding in this area is being moved to the top of our project list. The project is expected to be completed within 2 years. And I know that can't come soon enough for the residents in the Centennial Hills area, but keep in mind the initial funding for this project wasn't expected to be available for 5 to 7 years. Our crews responded almost immediately to the original storm on August 25th and to the flooding problems on August 31st and September 1st. They have been working diligently to address road cleanup, including all 3 days of the holiday weekend. We also engaged Las Vegas Paving to assist with those efforts and provide support on 2 emergency issues. We are still compiling a list of activities that will need to be addressed in response to the problems caused by the effects of the heavy precipitation combined with the consequences of the forest fire. Some of these activities are repairs and some are even upgrades. The important thing is that immediate issues have been addressed.
We've had a very wet and unusual summer monsoon season this year. In July, the Carpenter 1 area, there was some runoff there and some of the soot and ash came through the town. Not at that much pace or velocity. But on August 25th, we had a huge storm. We had a rain gauge 3 miles north of the Kyle Canyon Detention Basin that measured 4.1 inches of rain. Our average rainfall in Las Vegas is 4.2 inches a year. With the National Weather Service, we know that there was up to 6 inches of rain that fell upstream of Kyle Canyon during that storm. There was a 4.5-foot wave of water running 300 feet wide through that basin when the storm was coming in. Subdivisions would have been completely destroyed and lives lost. It would have been 25 times greater that amount of water running through the urban area. And I think today we'd be talking about a presidential disaster declaration and looking at how we're going to rebuild a big part of this community.
The water is coming in at a rate of about 10,000 cubic feet per second. The detention basin is designed so it releases the water at a much slower rate, 300 feet per second. So you can see the difference of the water coming into the basin, 10,000 feet per second, coming out at 300 cubic feet per second. And so that's why it took so long to drain out the basin. It took 2.5 days to empty out this basin because there's so much water in there.
We all know that the flash floods that basically received here are part of a normal occurrence, but what we're seeing is somewhat unprecedented between not only the effects somewhat coming from the fire areas, but also just the amount of moisture. You know, nature is accustomed to reclaiming area after fire. As a matter of fact, if you've been up Highway 157, you've seen the green up already occurring in the Harris Springs area. So one of the benefits of the moisture has been that green up. On the flip side, it will take probably about 5 to 7 years is the anticipation for that ground vegetation to reestablish sufficiently to start modifying and mitigating a lot more of that erosive impact.
If we get another heavy rain, we could have a repeat of what has already taken place last week and hopefully nothing more. We are all working together to complete the system and make it safer for our community. And I want to thank everyone and our crews, especially in the field, for their hard work.
We're constantly building different pieces of the puzzle of the flood control network, and every time we build a piece, someone else is protected. And that's a great part of our job, is that we get to see those improvements go into the ground and we get to see that protection. And so it's just a great thing for us to be able to know that the community is being protected by these facilities on a daily basis.
So just know that you're getting that word out and you're able to change people's actions based on what you're doing and have the influence to possibly save lives is extremely gratifying. It's why I became a meteorologist.
The Flood Control District builds detention basins and flood channels to move floodwater through urban areas down to Lake Mead. But it's important to remember that the streets are a vital part of the flood control system.
You know, our flood control system consists of these big facilities, channels, storm drains, and detention basins. But to get the flow into a storm drain, we have to put in a series of drop inlets to collect the flow in the curb. But we can't put a drop inlet everywhere. And so we have to rely on the street network and the curb and gutter in the street to convey that flow to the drop inlets or to the channels in the storm drains to be able to collect it and get it on downstream to Las Vegas Wash. So the street is part of the flood control network, and no matter what, even if we had all of our master plan facilities in place now, there's always still going to be drainage in the street. There's still going to be flow in the street. But what we'll try to do is minimize that flow so that the roads are passable when you're driving. Generally, we design roadways with what we call a centerline crown, which means that the center of the street's higher than the curb, and it slopes from the center out to the curb, and that's where we locate our drop inlets in the curb line along the roadways. So essentially what that does is forces the water to the outside of the roadway, away from the center, and it allows it to collect in the curb so that we can collect it with drop inlets.
Every year, the district completes projects that help protect life and property. And when the project on Grand Teton is complete, this area will be better protected from flooding.
I'm Agent Smith.
And I'm Agent Jones.
We're busting people who pollute Clark County.
Uh-oh.
Sir, your dog left a little gift for us.
He did?
Sir, pet waste can wash off lawns down storm drains untreated into Lake Mead.
Oh.
Sir, when Fido leaves a gift, do your duty. Scoop it and toss it.
Oh, okay.
Do something positive.
Don't trash Clark County. It's our home, too.
Whenever you come to water in a roadway, think. If you think you can get across, you can't. If you think driving fast will get you through it, it won't. If you think it's not that deep, it is. Whenever you come to water, think. Then think again.
A reminder from the Clark County Regional Flood Control District.
This summer, all eyes were on the Northwest, but last year it was the area around the Desert Rose Golf Course that saw major flooding. That's why the Flood Control District, Clark County, and the City of Las Vegas are working together on a major project that will redesign the golf course, alleviate flooding in the area, and remove 1,700 homes and businesses from a flood zone.
In June of last year, because I'm now on the flood board, I asked if that item could be moved up for construction purposes, and staff took a look at it. The board agreed, and they said yes. You know, this is one that we have some additional money because construction costs came in cheaper. We can devote that to it. So in June, we actually were ahead of the game, so to speak, voted to appropriate $35 million for a new flood project.
Perhaps the most unique feature of this project is the fact that built into two major washes, the Flamingo Wash and the Las Vegas Wash, is the Desert Rose Golf Course. Designed and built in 1964, the Desert Rose Golf Course was one of the first golf courses built in southern Nevada. As part of its design, the golf course was intended to capture overflow from the washes that run right through the middle of it.
Part of this is because the golf course is in the middle of the wash, that will be rebuilt. And so that is another benefit for that community in the long run. I made a promise 7 years ago when I first ran, because that was one of the first things I heard from, is to keep that a golf course, keep that a green space. So we've hired the golf course design person. We have a stakeholders committee that advise the design people. Some of them are homeowners and some are golfers that have golfed there forever. So it's been a really good synergy. Sometimes you get a win-win out of something that's a very tragic situation. Another key factor will be if I can find the funding through our capital dollars separate from the flood to hopefully rebuild or remodel that clubhouse. They're very much restricted on what those flood control dollars can be used for, so they cannot pay for the clubhouse reconstruction. They wouldn't even be rebuilding the golf course if it hadn't been in the middle of the floodplain.
As part of the process, the district has been hosting a series of public meetings. The purpose of these meetings is to keep the public informed, as well as to engage discussions about the progress, design, and timeline of the project. The district feels that engaging the public and providing a forum for them to voice concerns and provide feedback can only help make a project of this scope a little easier on everyone.
But the good thing is they heard at our first town hall from the folks on the other leg of the wash, why couldn't we also construct some protections there? Gail Frazier, the head of the flood control district, went back with his engineers. They took a look at it. They talked with our public works people, and they made a decision that we really should. So we increased that now to almost $51 million project. But that'll protect, the whole thing is about life and safety for those homes and those homeowners there. And that project, once it's completed, will bring all of them some comfort for, as far as the safety is concerned. The main thing I want from residents is to make sure that they keep property secure. There's a lot of foreclosed homes along that wash, unfortunately, which puts them vulnerable to theft, other criminal activities. Secondarily, if they have trash that's built up because of the winds that were here 3 weeks ago, then let us know that. We want to make sure that they don't have a further devaluation of their property over there. And again, the truck route's going to be very key for those folks, making sure the kids are not impacted, the school buses aren't impacted, and then just keeping them apprised of when we start to move dirt. And that's why the law requires actually at least 3 public hearings. We may have 4, just depending on making sure. It's a fairly close-knit community, so it's easy to kind of have those meetings held And so more information is better as far as I'm concerned.
In the coming months, you'll notice a lot of work happening in this area. This is the largest project in the district's history with a $50 million price tag. Once complete, this project will prevent last summer's devastation from happening again, protecting thousands of residents for generations to come.
It was devastating. My staff and I went out and oh my gosh, the one gentleman had the most, he had 3.5 feet. He took me into his backyard. It had, the pressure from the flooding blew out his doors from his kitchen all the way into the living room. He had over 3.5 feet of water. One good idea came from a constituent that day, and she said, we have all this rugs and furniture that are useless at this point. So she said, is there a way we could get dumpsters? And Republic Services kindly came through. They free donated dumpsters all throughout the area. The mud was unbelievable. Just the volume of it that crossed all the streets. One home, the foundation was shot, so I had the building department go out and inspect as quickly as they could so that there were any safety, and they actually had to close a couple homes and relocate people. The biggest takeaway will be the safety of those homes in the long run. I think we forget that we're a desert here. Once you have even a small amount of rain, it can move very, very quickly. So my most exciting will be once we get that flood channel rebuilt, that those homes will be protected.
We have all seen the devastation that floods can cause to homes and lives in Clark County. Has your neighborhood or home ever been affected by major storms? Federal flood insurance is a smart and cost-effective investment if you think your home is vulnerable. Some easy-to-understand assessments can help determine if you need flood insurance. Call your insurance agent or call 1-888-CALL-FLOOD or visit the Regional Flood Control District's website for guidance. See if flood insurance makes sense for you.
I want to show you some pictures your parents probably wouldn't want you to see. Pictures of parents making big mistakes. Here's someone's dad doing something foolish. He's actually trying to drive through a flooded street. Here's another. And another. Every summer we get flash floods, and every summer the same thing happens. And hey, if all this water can do this to a car, imagine what it'd do to a kid. Look, don't be foolish. Flash floods kill. Tell your parents.
A reminder from the Clark County Regional Flood Control District.
It's not often we see flooding like this in our valley, but there is a place you can go where you can come face to face with a flash flood every day in a safe and controlled environment.
One of the major aspects of the Springs Preserve is to encourage people to interact with nature appropriately. Sometimes that might mean giving them information about how to approach certain animals or plants in a safe manner, or not to approach them in some cases. Or it might be things about water conservation, or in some cases we might be giving them information about what to avoid with nature, such as flash floods.
The Springs Preserve offers a wealth of educational opportunities presented in fun, hands-on exhibits. One such exhibit is this, the Flash Flood Simulator. It begins with a guided nature tour that's interrupted by a flash flood. The controlled environment allows children to get their feet wet without actually getting their feet wet.
It's a very dramatic 5,000 gallons just kind of rushing towards you very, very quickly. Depending on where you are in the world, you might see waterfalls in some places, but very rarely are you able to be that close. And we want to reinforce to people that these flash floods are very, very strong. And although they're beautiful in some cases, I mean, cascading water by most accounts is, they're also very, very dangerous. And, you know, here we have a nice barrier that's sturdy, but out in nature, inevitably, there is no nice barrier. You can get to the edge of a cliff, and that cliff can very quickly fall out from under you. So we by no means want to encourage people to see one out in nature, so this kind of augments people's understanding of what a flash flood is and what it can do to us and our property.
The Springs Preserve plays host to an average of 33,000 school children every year. That's a tremendous opportunity to bring the message of flood safety to young children as well as their parents. And that's something the Springs Preserve takes very seriously.
We do have a lot of school children who come through here. We want to support the messages of the Flood Control District and other kinds of agencies that are encouraging children to interact with dry washes appropriately. And as we all know, very quickly that dry wash can become a river of water. What I find is very interesting is it reminds the parents A lot of times adults get these messages as children and they might forget about them, or they think the messages are for everybody but them. Inevitably, by being around that, the adults start to internalize that message, and I think it kind of reinforces things that they might not have heard for several years, or they might not have seen the messages targeted to them in such a way that we do target towards the smaller school children. It's great to be in a facility where we're providing people with basic information that might save their lives. Certainly the flash flood is one example, but we also have other information here at the preserve in relation to venomous animals, certain plants that might present health problems for folks. It's nice to work at a facility that can pass on those messages to the general public.
The Springs Preserve has done a great job helping to educate residents about the dangers of flash flooding and flood safety. And now the district has a smartphone app called FloodSpot that puts the power of flood safety in the palm of your hand.
The FloodSpot app is available for free in both the Apple and Google Play stores. The app features live, up-to-the-minute weather and flood reports. No matter where you are, you'll receive flash flood warnings from the National Weather Service right to your phone. You can upload photos of trouble spots or see where roads are flooded. And if you've got kids or grandkids who love smartphone games, we've got you covered. The app's game lets you steer your car around potential pitfalls and score big points for the superhero. Head to www.befloodsafe.com to download the app or just search for FloodSpot in your app store. And for even more data, check out the district's rainfall maps at www.regionalflood.org. You can get real-time rainfall amounts, radar, and even see traffic cameras to see which areas are getting wet, or worse, flooded.
The district is working hard to give you the tools you need to stay safe the next time we see a flood. And that's going to do it for another edition of the Flood Channel. Make sure to visit our website at www.befloodsafe.com or find us on Facebook or follow us on Twitter. And from all of us here at the Flood Channel, always remember to be flood safe.